The greatest challenges we face in understanding the nature of our world are sorting out the things that are not apparent, the things that are sort of illusions in our world. And when we realized that the Earth wasn't flat, that illusion was fairly easy to overcome because it involved the world as a whole, because it involved the world as this shape that we were already familiar with. And astrotometry is very different in that sense. The illusion that is revealed with the understanding of the mechanism of hypertime is pervasive in its manifestation throughout our world. And as a sort of talking point for this topic on understanding hypertime, I want to point to an article that I ran into on the internet called Electricity and Human Consciousness. Now, I'm not advocating all of the information that's in this article, but there's a quote from someone I consider to be very, very intelligent and noteworthy, Rudolf Steiner. He says, "The greatest contrast to electricity is light. And to consider light a form of electricity is to mix good and evil." And I think that this approach to assign good and evil to physical properties in our world is one of the things that I would have to call Steiner on. I don't think that this analogy is necessarily a good analogy, but there is this darkness to the nature of magnetism that is inherently interwoven with what we perceive as light. Commonly in physics, light is understood to be this electromagnetic wave. There is an electrical component and there is a magnetic component. And the magnetic component of the wave is understood to be invisible in our analysis of it. We can't see magnetism. We can see the light. We can see the movement of the electron in the form of the photon. But the nature of the movement of the electron is what astrotometry is bringing to the table. And to let go of what we have previously understood about the three-dimensional nature of the world is required to really work with that concept. And so there's this issue of space in between spaces and times in between times that has to be sorted out, that has to be unraveled in its complexity, in its true nature. And that nature of the magnetism cannot be directly observed. It's not something that we have an existing model for. And so this is one of the huge challenges in astrotometry, is to sort out the actual movement in between the movements that we perceive as the photon. And so our modern concept of an electromagnetic wave is that it is a transverse wave that has an electrical component and then in this other dimension has a magnetic component. And that these two components of the wave are detectable with different types of detection mechanisms. And in astrotometry, this magnetic component of the wave is not understood to be a singular wave. It's understood to be a multiple wave. And that's what hypertime is. So rather than comparing the magnetic component of the wave to evil in a more abstract sense, I would like to provide the deeper understanding of the magnetic force as the progenitor of matter and energy. And so the concept is that if you consider the photon or the particle, in astrotometry this is understood to be a standing wave. In other words, the apparent existence of the photon, which can be abstracted with another model besides the wave mechanical model, is an interference pattern that exists between a distant place in time and its current place in time. So the concept is that you have these 6 other places. So you have these 6 other sources of waves that come in to produce this as a standing form in our physical matter. And this analysis, this understanding that there are these 6 directions, is only a application of the understanding of the underlying wave mechanics. When you have in 2 dimensions a waveform, and there is a wave in the same medium traveling in the other direction, these waves will interfere and produce a larger node where they interfere. So if you have these 2 waves that are coming in from these 2 directions, they'll interfere at a point and create a standing node. Now, if this interference is strong enough, if this interference is constructive enough, this will create its own wave that moves in the same medium. And that is, in astrotometry, what is considered to be this 7th source, this 7th movement. But the concept, the reason there are 6 is because this is a 2-dimensional wave, and you need 2 of these for each of the dimensions. And so we have 3 dimensions, and so there's 6 of them that come in order to produce this. So this is the mechanism that underlies the coincident persistence of our physical matter and the movement of electromagnetic energy. And this is a very difficult concept to understand 3-dimensionally. And it's even more difficult to understand that what is moving us through time is not what it appears to be in our analysis of time. Because in astrotometry, hypertime is not time. It's not a replacement for time. It is a concept for something that happens in between our perceptible moments. And so this is something that underlies the very nature of time and space. And you could call it hypertime space, which is probably a more accurate term for it. It's just that hypertime is, in our understanding of time-space, seemingly the more accurate way to look at it, because it's something that happens in between our perceptible times. And as we sort it out, I think that will be the way that it falls out into the understanding of the nature of the world. And so one of the obvious questions that comes up is, how does the nature of the movement through hypertime relate to our perception of the light? In other words, you see this light up in the sky, or you see this light that travels to the eye. The light part of it we get because we see it. The magnetic part of it, or the hypertime part of it, we don't get because we don't see it. How does that relate to the actual physical translation of the object as it moves through hypertime?